Welcome to Dirt Magic, a podcast chronicling the Sierra Buttes Trail Stewardship's mission of building sustainable recreation-based communities through stewardship, job creation, and world-class events, providing quality outdoor experiences through trail construction and maintenance in the Lost Sierra. I'm your host, Martin Scheel. On this episode of Dirt Magic, we join the Orogenesis Collective in their mission to boldly go where no mountain bike trail has gone before. We will explore the vision of a new way on old ground, born from bikepacking roots and dreamed about over pints in small mountain towns. A vibrant community of people growing their relationship with backcountry landscapes, each other, and themselves along an uninterrupted ribbon of single-track trails that bridge borders throughout the western ranges of the North American continent. Our guests today have adventured through these landscapes on hands, feet, and wheels, and certainly aren't afraid to raise a glass and say cheers to a moonshot idea. From completing the epic Oregon Timber Trail to spending 3% of his life on the face of El Capitan and living the dream of a 20-plus year trail stewardship and founder of the world-famous Downieville Classic, these gentlemen's resume speaks for itself. Introducing Orogenesis Collective Executive Director Gabriel Tiller, Editor-in-Chief and co-founder of the Gear Lab websites Chris McNamara, and SBTS Executive Director Greg Williams. Well, gentlemen, welcome to Dirt Magic, and big thanks for being here.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for the invite.
Yeah, super stoked on this one. The Orogenesis Collective, its mission to build the longest mountain bike trail in the world from Canada to Cabo. Man, over 5,000 miles, nearly 500,000 feet of elevation gain, and I'm assuming that means some pretty rad downhilling as well. 24 tiers, 87% dirt, over 50 indigenous territories, 7 states, and 3 countries. Obviously, this is a simple and easy project to take on, and as we wrap our heads around this simple project, let's get some background on our guests today about who they are, what they do on this blue planet, and what brought them to Orogenesis. And Gabriel, we'll start with you.
Yeah, thanks. So I think it was back in 2015, I started working with Travel Oregon, the state tourism agency up here in Oregon, to develop a bikepacking route across the state. They saw some cool hut systems in New Zealand and Colorado, other places that they want to replicate in the West. And we sort of did a feasibility analysis and decided the hut system maybe was like a little bit out of our reach, but we could certainly try to piece together a long distance trail, and that could lead to some huts in the future. So we launched that right around the same time Nick Carmen and Lael Wilcox launched the Baja Divide. And it was, I don't think I was the only one, but it was definitely a light bulb moment just seeing both those on the map together, being like, well, we obviously have to connect them now through California. So that was sort of the preliminary idea. People have been talking about it for decades now. I think ever since the PCT was developed, mountain bikers have wanted a similar experience. But we started just plugging away at it, trying to talk to other bikepacking race promoters, route developers, adding all of their different routes to a map and looking at like public land overlays just to see if it was even possible, if there was a corridor of public land and existing trails and roads. And then ever since then, we've been meeting more and more cool people out on the ground and slowly refining all the different trails and landscapes and roads that it passes through.
So is this a side gig for you? I don't even know how you could even call it that when something that's big, or I mean, do you have like a real job, or is this it? Is this your passion, and is this the career at this point?
Yeah, this is my main gig. I'm the executive director now of the Orogenesis Collective, and have been for 2.5 years. So yeah, I was involved with the Oregon Timber Trail. I was the executive director there for a number of years, getting that off the ground, and then really just kept coming back to this. I was doing this on the side, going down to California for like a week or so every year to do some scouting, and that's how I met Chris. And then that evolved over time into a full-time gig like it is now.
Well, that's a good way. a good segue into Chris. And I'm curious, did you guys meet like on an exposed slab of granite near vertical with some powder on your hands, or was it on the ground?
It was exposed online bushwhacking through emails and maps.
Yeah,
So
we haven't actually climbed together yet, have we?
no,
No.
we got to do that.
Oh gosh,
Um,
to me that sound like riding with someone like Carl Decker on the mountain bike trail, or Mark Weir or something like that. I may actually ride with them for about 15 seconds. Well, that goes for Greg as well, and then after that, it's really riding behind. But well, Chris, give us the scoop. What are you doing today, and how did you come to know Orogenesis?
Yeah, so it actually started with a little intersection of Sierra Buttes history, which is I really wanted to get involved with the Tahoe community, and I looked around and I saw that Tamba was really the kind of epicenter of that. And I met Ben and Amy, and they told me their story about how they had come to Tahoe and not really seen a real culture, and they went to Sierra Buttes to kind of learn, how do you bring people together? How do you create these amazing events and trails and the intersection of all of it? And I just thought this was amazing. And so I just started working with them, saw how incredibly cool it was to build more single track, and kind of was like, well, we should probably have a route around Tahoe. Like that would seem like the thing to do. And that process went way better than I thought. And so that I started thinking, well, what else could be connected? I'd always loved dirt biking the length of the Sierra, or at least from Tahoe to Mammoth. And so started chipping away at that when I met Gabe. And it was so cool to meet someone who not only has a big idea, but has a very legit resume for, having created the trail across Oregon. So I was like, wow, this is an insanely big idea, but I think this might be exactly the right person. And this seems like exactly the right time to put this all together.
Nice. I'm excited. It's amazing, how things can come together sometimes. And I'm going to bring in, Greg, our executive director here at the Sierra Buttes Trail Stewardship, and, another gentleman that is no stranger to grand visions, and starting monumental, and taking it from there with a moonshot. And of course, I'm talking about the Connected Communities vision. But, Greg, obviously meeting up with McNamara and the SBTS being, long time, sister organizations or partners with the Tahoe Area Mountain Biking Association. What brought Orogenesis to your doorstep?
Yeah, it was just the connection through Chris. Chris and I have known each other for a while, and he had mentioned this project and asked if he could put Gabriel in touch with me. And I had a phone call, started looking at some maps, and kind of just letting him know what we were up to with Connected Communities, where those trail connections were being planned, and also new trails that we've been building, and trying to get through kind of the Lost Sierra zone, from like Chester and Quincy and Downieville and those areas. So common interest through the zone, and trying to just get all this linked up. And right about the same time, we were working with Backcountry Discovery Routes, which is they do the adventure motorcycle routes, and planning the Northern California route through the area. So there's still a lot happening, but it's cool to have these signature routes that go through our zone and touch into our communities. And
I was super stoked, and the fact that the stewardship and what we do can have a part, small part, large part, with Orogenesis is just it's pretty sweet, pretty awesome when you look at projects like that, outdoor recreation, and something that'll be legacy for generations to come. And I touched on some of the high point details of Orogenesis at the beginning of the show, but Gabriel, let's do a little deeper dive. I mean, truly, what is the Orogenesis Collective, and what do you see as the Orogenesis Trail when it's completed?
Yeah, it's so it's a long ways from being 100% single track, but what's pretty surprising is that it is, like you mentioned, almost 90% dirt. So I think single track percentage is about 30 some percent, and I think that ends up being between 1,500 and 1,800 miles of trail. And but that's not to say that those other couple thousand miles of dirt roads aren't spectacular and challenging and fun in their own right. So just really stoked at how good it is going to be already. And just really excited to keep making good connections. We have a lot of ideas, a lot of proposals for new trail connections where with just a little bit of trail building, we can make the route experience a lot better. Just chipping away at that into the future is going to be really make it a lot better. But I think what it's at right now is fantastic.
With a project with such a grand scope, and I think for the layperson, if they were seeing it the first time without doing a deep dive, they're probably looking a project that would be a moonshot, like for the regular old person here on Earth to try to get themselves to the moon. But in reality, this isn't building a brand new trail from Canada to Cabo. It's really connecting existing systems, existing trails, finding pathways, organizations, and communities to support it. But a lot of the route potentially is there. It just some of it still needs to be found or refined. Would that be a good way to say it?
Yeah, and that was really what the strategy was with the Oregon Timber Trail, and then also with Orogenesis is, as you guys all know, building even a mile of new trail on public lands is immensely challenging and takes a really long time. So we wanted to move quicker than that. We knew that if we could create something that got a community of people around it to support it, then that new trail building in the future or the hut system in the future would move a lot smoother with that momentum, with that community asking for it, pushing for it. So it's pieced together with right now, all existing trails, roads. We haven't built any new trail, but a big part of our job, a lot of these existing roads and trails are in disrepair, some state of abandonment. So it's been, a big part of the work we're doing is reaching out to groups like Sierra Buttes and, the dozens of other trail organizations along the route to be like, hey, I know you're focused on your trails, probably closer to your door, but there's some really cool backcountry trails that could be part of Orogenesis, then could be like do a collaboration and fix them up, clean them up, get them open again. And that's really been the focus. So yeah, focusing entirely on existing infrastructure, but with the goal of building new connections in the future.
As we approach Northern California here, the La Sierra, the northern portion of the Sierra Nevadas, I've seen the term Sierra Camino. And Chris, I know, you have, quite a bit to do with this. And this is, somewhat where the stewardship and Greg's vision, the connected communities vision comes in, and our existing trail system up here. But give us a little synopsis of what is the Sierra Camino and what's its connection to Orogenesis.
Yeah, so each section of Orogenesis, or Orogenesis is broken into multiple sections. So there's, and Gabe is the much better person to talk about this because I really just am obsessed on the Sierra and know that pretty well. But the Sierra Camino is the section of Orogenesis through the Sierra. And I kind of look at it sort of like as the John Muir Trail is to the PCT. For me, that's that kind of connection, which is there's this much broader 5,000 mile trail, but then there's this really special section that connects towns all along the Sierra. And it's basically an extension of connected communities. And that's what I have loved about connected communities is not only what you guys are building, but to me, you guys are inspiring so many other trail organizations to be like, wait, we should do that. And that's a huge part of why I think I got excited, and we're definitely kind of following your roadmap. And I'll just say one other thing is the truly surprising and magical part of this process for me is just that doing the inventory often reveals there's so much more than you expected already there. That's one message I'd love to get out there to more people is that when thinking about the trail around Tahoe, everyone was shocked that after 2 years of bushwhacking, like 85% of the trail already existed. And similar thing with Oregon Timber Trail, and then similar thing with the Orogenesis. It's just been impressive that once you have the vision and start doing the inventory, there's almost always way more existing than you think. And so that's just been a really cool thing. And I hope other people will be inspired to go just start piecing together what exists today, and dreaming big about how those existing pieces could be connected.
And Greg too, with the Connected Communities vision, and this is one of the stewardships, be a legacy vision that we have, and of course starting small and as we expand, and we have quite an inventory of existing trails, roadways, that we can currently connect a lot of our communities with, for outdoor recreation, albeit bicycle, hiking, I mean, you name it. But as far as the Sierra Camino and connecting into Orogenesis, what are your thoughts on some of our trails? I know that, Mexican Mine, we've got Claremont, which is a future build, Eureka Ridge, Fredonia Pass, Kettle Rock, Hamilton Mountain. I mean, there's a lot of areas, still to be explored and tied together. But where do you see the stewardship and kind of our link in helping with our current trail system in Orogenesis?
Yeah, I mean, as we add those segments, it just gets better. Like right now, all these towns are connected with dirt roads. So part of it was mapping those out and trying to get like the kind of the better, more fun to experience roads mapped out. The Plumas is one of the most heavily roaded forests in the U.S., and that's because of all the timber. And I'm sure, you guys are experiencing that same thing up in Oregon. There's so many of these routes that have been put in for logging that just got left or abandoned, So I know for some of our mapping, it's like, trying to use LiDAR if it's available, or, like different, I guess, visuals of how you look at the maps, and find those old routes and see if you can piece them together. But in terms of like our zone, you can already get to all the places. It's just going to be that much better when it's a single track experience. And, the grades are gentler than some of the trails that were built during the gold mining era, when it was just a pack mule going from point A to point B. So, but yeah, it's like Gabe was saying, it's not easy to build trails these days. It takes years of environmental review, and those environmental reviews can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars for the surveys and the documentation. So as much as you can find that's existing on the ground that can just be rehabilitated, it gets a little more realistic and a ton more financially feasible.
Well, definitely too. And I think some of the, with any, new project, it's easy to create a lot of preliminary buzz, get folks excited. But when it does come down to brass tacks, and those folks that were all excited, ask that, ever important first question. Well, can I go out and ride it? Can I go out and hike it? Where is it? Can you show me on a map? And, we've run into that with our Connected Communities vision a little bit at the stewardship. And I imagine that there's some challenges too, Gabriel and Chris, when it comes to Orogenesis, is just getting the information out there about, what really does already exist, what can be ridden on already. But going from 3 countries, Canada, United States, and into Mexico, what are some of the challenges that you're seeing right now with connecting these trails and, literally putting it on paper as a map point?
Yeah, I think we've been grappling with that too, just because it's so massive. It's hard for us to wrap our heads around it, and we're thinking about it every day of the week. So how do we share this with the rider who just wants to go ride a part of it on his week off or her week off? So we're trying to, and that's what we're doing this year in 2025. We've selected the best sections in each of the chapters. That's what we're calling the different sections. Each chapter is, I think it's between 500 and 800 miles long. But the sections we're releasing are going to be shorter, between, I think, 100 and 200 miles each. And those are sort of the best, what's rideable right now. And that way there'll be like a more approachable way to sort of digest all the information. And then as next year and in subsequent years, we'll keep adding on to those sections, launching new pieces until it's all connected or almost all connected. There's going to be a few gaps here and there where it's challenging. There's just private land or a river canyon or some other blockade. But I think we've got some good solutions in the works for all of those as well. But yeah, really, we've got a lot to share right now over the next couple of years. That's good as it is.
And with that too, trying to create, momentum, to keep the ball rolling, so to speak, or the wheels rolling. And outreach, obviously, Orogenesis, you can look up the Orogenesis Collective, on social media, and you'll find it, the website as well, orogenesiscollective.org. But, what other avenues, are you looking to? Because it's like, obviously it can be very different, in 3 different countries and even within the United States, you're traveling down, 3 states, multiple, dozens of counties, multiple organizations. So how do you keep the outreach going, to keep the folks interested? And I mean, ultimately we'll talk about this too, is, paying for some of this, but yeah, what type of outreach, have you guys been doing, the positives, and then what are some of the challenges with that?
Yeah, it's definitely a big challenge. I think, that's why we're here on the show, right? Is podcasts are a great avenue for that. I think they're a more popular channel, or becoming more popular channel, just like YouTube, which we haven't really touched a whole lot yet. Some of the other more traditional digital channels like Instagram and Facebook are just sort of increasingly frustrating on even getting anything seen, just because there's so much information out there, so many different things competing for attention. And what I find most valuable and most rewarding is in-person events. So that's work parties. I think there's just something really cool about visiting a town, hooking up with the local trail group, going to one of their dig days, and just talking to people, hearing what they're all about. And you work together, you create something together, you're proud of it at the end of the day. Like, that's just such a much more valuable connection. And they're going to remember, that conversation you had talking about this big long trail, for a lot longer than if they had seen it on the internet somewhere. So want to do a lot more events. We've got a couple work parties coming up in the summer, and that'll be in California and Washington. And then a couple in-person events, group rides or slideshows, also throughout California and Washington. So we'll be publishing all that this spring.
Nice. Well, when it comes to the Sierra Camino section, you may know a guy or two, or an organization that could possibly step in with some folks and get a group of volunteers out there to dig some dirt. And I know that, Greg, when we look at each year and 300 plus miles of just maintaining, our trail systems, from Downieville to Lakes Basin, up here into Quincy area, Mount Huff and southern Lassen County. It's a pretty daunting task, costs a lot of money. But the trail's got to be open. If they're not open, people aren't going to come recreate. But, Greg and Chris, there's some, when we look at our resources and, keeping things, active and exciting for folks, what do you guys see? Is it something that we could potentially help as an organization, with our work days and fold that in? I mean, we're pretty close to, where many of those trails could actually be within our own area that we work on. Some of them still not built or not completed. But those type of trail days, that outreach, is that something, that you guys see that we can possibly help Orogenesis with?
Yeah, 100%. The La Sierra is one of those areas where we haven't really dove in super deep. Like, we've been focusing on the problem areas, but we'll look at the La Sierra and be like, oh yeah, those guys got it. They've got this grand vision that's going to intersect with our vision perfectly. So, there's obviously a great network of existing trails and also a massive network of planned trails or proposed trails with connected communities. So both of those are going to be integral to the route. I really wanted to make sure the route came through Downieville. I think it's a historic place for mountain biking in North America. So I think that's really important. So coming down through over the Sierra Buttes down into town, I think is going to be a really cool section of the route. And like you mentioned earlier, the Mexican mine on the other side of town, heading down towards Truckee, I think is going to be a really cool connection as well. So I've been talking to Kurt Gensheimer about that project. I think he's heading up. Now I'm trying to organize some work days on that with y'all. So really hoping, we can make that happen this summer or sometime soon and do a collaborative event on the Mexican Mine project.
Yeah, we're hoping to get that one kicked off this year. We're just waiting on the agreement with the forest. So it just seems like it keeps getting delayed longer and longer now with the federal freeze on funding. We're hopeful. We thought we were going to start work on it last year, and we're hopeful for this year. It would help round out our Downieville trail crew to give them a full season of work. So in some ways, we're counting on it. But that'll be a great one off the North Yuba and up into the town of Forest. And that whole network of trails around Forest is pretty fun to ride.
So Greg, on that one, could you literally then, start at Packer Saddle, bomb the downhill, get through Downieville, head over to hit North Yuba, go up when it's completed the Mexican Mine? Now, could you get all the way to Truckee from that point on trail or at least Fire Road?
Well, from there, you're going to be up on, it's like the Hennis Pass, which was like during the gold rush, it was a major supply route and was actually so busy that during the day, only supply wagons could be on the route. And if you were migrating, you had to travel after hours. So some great history, some big views off of there. But Hennis Pass does take you over the Sierra, into Washoe County. And from there, I'm not sure. I haven't seen the exact route through there, Gabriel, but we are building on the east side of Boca and Stampede that will connect into Truckee. And I know the Truckee Donner Land Trust has been working pretty efficiently of buying land on it would be on the west side of Highway 89. And they're always great with building trails. So I think you probably have a few options through that zone.
Yeah, that is one of the gaps, and it's another one that's been talked about for a long time. How do you connect Truckee to Downieville? And there's a few different. There's a way to do it today. It's just a bit circuitous. It's not a very direct route. And man, there's just some amazing granite country in there that I think is going to be really cool, especially if you stay up in the high country a bit. And really, it's only right now there's about a 2-mile gap. And there's a trail that connects from across those 2 miles, but it's the PCT. So you can look at Strava heat maps and see mountain bikers are using the PCT there, which makes sense because there's not connectivity for mountain bikes currently. So we're hoping to use that as sort of an arguing point to build a new trail connection somewhere in there. And again, it's really, really neat to see how just 2 miles of trail will be able to make that connection happen, using that and using the Hennis Pass Road and then the Mexican Mine Trail. It all links up.
Some of those areas, they can get pretty remote, and some of our previous discussions, and Chris, I think you brought this up too of our work crews, other organizations and their work crews. But, when you look at, a radius of what any organization or trail building or trail maintenance group can do, at some point you're going to get outside that bubble, because you're really going to be literally in the middle of nowhere, but still on trail. And that obviously brings some challenges, just a simple annual brushing out, keeping things from coming across the trail, making sure the trails safe for users. But that's not exactly an out and back for a trail organization, to get out there, especially if they're having to use bikes, or if it's moto legal, if they can even get out there on motos, even just to get tools out there. But you kind of had some unique ideas too in one of our discussions of potentially folks that are going to use the trail. Maybe there's a way for them to be kind of the volunteer army, so to speak, as they're actually using it. And I think you had some ideas on that. Maybe expand on that a little.
Yeah, I mean, I think what the message we would love to get out is that there are so many opportunities at so many different levels for people to be involved. One of the key ones is, as we were talking about earlier, is just making sure we don't lose existing trails. Get out there, make sure that they're not getting totally overgrown. Report back. It's so much easier to save a trail from getting overgrown than to then have to go create a new trail from scratch. I don't know the exact number, but I'm guessing it's like 1,000x, maybe 10,000x. So we would love just for people to know, like, just getting out there. Greg mentioned LiDAR earlier. There's all sorts of things you can do just from your computer to look around and be like, wait a minute, there's something already there. Like, uh, just being able to like report back on that is huge for us. And then of course, actually going out there, riding when things are getting overgrown, kind of flagging that and reporting back. That is, I think, one of our biggest challenges and opportunities is to kind of build this kind of more informal network of people in these more remote locations. And there are real challenges, but for like an adventurous person, it's amazing how much one or two people can get done. And not only on the reporting side, but just on kind of, basic maintenance side, we've been blown away by how a few individuals can have a massive impact. So we're always hunting for those individuals, and we would love if a few were fleshed out from this conversation.
Well, definitely. And I think, some terms that were used too, and these are appropriate too, where, someone literally is the trail scout, the scout that goes out and reports back and lets folks know what needs to be done. And either you or Gabriel brought up too, really leaning on quote, citizen scientists, to help keep the trails open and keep the information flowing. So that, you don't get between a rock and a hard place when it comes to keeping the trail open. And I think that's pretty awesome. I think we probably have quite a few people within, our group of volunteers that would love that, especially with someone like Gensheimer. I mean, I think that he's as much mountain goat as he is human being when he gets on a bicycle. So, hey, you just have to throw down the challenge to him. I don't know, Kurt. I don't know if anybody can actually go out there 60 or 70 miles and with loppers and get some work done. And all of a sudden, I think either be his podcast or I'd see video of him out in the middle of nowhere doing that very thing.
Yeah, and I should say these are common, I think, challenges that all trail organizations face with some of their like more distant trails or ones that aren't kind of in the core of their network. So part of what we're trying to do is create the knowledge base of how do you address this. And Gabe's done a great job of creating some kind of how-to tutorials that are on the website. And we would love, if people use those on Orogenesis, but also on any trail. And we'd also love to keep the conversation going of what are the best practices? If you only have so much time, how do you connect with people and get them really engaged? Like what actually gets people to get out there? What is it? And I think you guys have cracked the code so much on like, the events you do. You guys have created like a playbook for how you throw amazing events. And now we're trying to, I think, figure how do we write the playbook for taking care of some of these more remote trails and making sure they don't get lost.
Yeah, I mean, that was part of that, on a much more, micro scale was, the impetus of creating, the stewardship. I mean, literally with Greg and everything that he's done in Downieville and running shuttles up from Nevada City, putting people on the Downieville trail system, but, very quickly noticed that to keep those trails open was going to take more than just a few people and organizations. Folks really had to come together to keep the trails open and safe for everybody to use. And, I'm sure that Greg would attest to this too, of the challenges of, when you have to work through, multiple agencies. You've got counties, potentially, a city here and there, different forest ranger districts, sometimes state land as opposed to federal land, and of course, private property. You put all that together and that can be challenging. But my question on this is, how does that perspective look when you are talking about Canada and Mexico? I mean, obviously those challenges are the same in Oregon and Washington. There's bureaucracy and red tape everywhere. But when you step across those borders, how does that work in Canada and Mexico? I mean, has that been easier? Has it been harder? Because this is, what you guys are doing is a grand vision, but you're utilizing, mostly existing infrastructure. But still, it has a name. It's called Orogenesis. So it'll be the longest mountain bike trail in the world. So I'm sure that some folks look at that and go, "Oh, I don't know." So yeah, Canada, Mexico. How's that been going?
We've got a lot on our plate, so we haven't focused a ton on those. Luckily, the Baja Divide already exists. I think 100 or 200 people probably ride it every year, maybe more. I'm not even sure. It's a great bikepacking route. I've ridden some really big sections of it myself, and I was blown away by the landscape in Baja and how cool the road systems are. I mean, there's a reason the motorized car, motorcycle, etc. community has such popular races there, is because the roads are really cool. The landscape is really cool. So that route's fantastic. There's not a lot of single track, which I thought was going to be sort of a bummer, but the roads are super fun to ride, challenging in their own right. So, I think there's some room for trail development down in Baja, but it's not on our priority list. Working with the folks who are sort of curating that route to resolve any issues that pop up is the extent of our outreach. Up in Canada, I think the key there is really just networking with the trail groups and individuals on the ground. Chris just connected us with someone up there. The route enters into British Columbia, sort of in a remote area, a little bit farther east of the Cascades. And so I wasn't familiar with the area, but this person lives in the zone, knows the trails really well, has a bunch of suggestions, and it's a lot of it's under snow right now, but she's already got a list of things to go check out once it starts melting out this spring. So again, it just comes down to the locals, sort of like, feel it out, talk to them, see what the local ethos is on how you get things done, and just follow their lead.
Part of the intro earlier in the show, 50 plus indigenous territories that, Orogenesis will either travel through existing or by the time it's done, go through. And of course, we're deep into indigenous, territory here in the La Sierra. There's quite a few tribes, and Greg, what ours, just our trail system alone, with our connected communities vision, which indigenous tribes do we touch?
We go through Miwok, Nisenan, Maidu, Pit River, Concow, Washoe, and Paiute.
So there's 7 just in our area. So yeah, it's, I can see the importance of it. I mean, really trying to look back at our history, and we're fortunate that many of the trails, that maybe even gotten taken over during the gold rush were really, those were the roads, those were the highways. That's how they communicated and traded, and I mean, that was just life back then. Gabriel, do you see this as something to, potentially to help with outreach with folks that, is, obviously you could be having a fun, rad time on the trail, but potentially an educational experience as well. Has there been any pushback in that? I mean, a lot of times, still, things don't always, can be the smiley face in some section because, overlooking, some sensitive areas or sensitive history. But is that something historically that could be, beneficial for the trail users?
Yeah, I think it's just such a fascinating tapestry of indigenous and European history on the landscape, and I think there's just so much to learn from that. How that's evolved over the centuries. In humans have been in North America for anywhere from 14,000 years to forever. So it's sort of infinite, the amount you can learn from that. And I think there's a lot of interpretive opportunities, whether that's in, interpretive trails on the ground, sure, but also just in producing the route guide, is telling some of those stories. Like here in Oregon, with the Timber Trail, we produced a tier loop, a shorter section of the Timber Trail route that highlighted an indigenous story of this, or these 2 Native Americans that led General Fremont from the Dalles south on one of his exploratory missions. Actually, it was on his way to California. So it was, I think, really looking at that and figuring out how how these different people interacted with each other and ended up developing some of the routes that we still use today as our trails and roads. I think actually, Greg, I was all excited about some connection that I found up in the North Sierra. I was like, oh yeah, this trail goes there, and I think we can connect to Westwood. And Greg's like, no, that's a sacred spot, so we can't go there. And I was like, okay, that's all you need to say. So I'm sure there's probably more of those out there. Maybe some that we haven't discovered yet that are sensitive. But that's sort of the fun of trying to piece this all together, is just learning about that history.
I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be really good for people, especially when, you get in closer to communities and, have local organizations, that support Orogenesis, and those conversations, get to move forward. And better for the communities at hand too, because many times folks that live in communities, the historical, portion of it, many don't know. It's not something that gets taught in everyday classroom stuff, but understanding the history of where you live and recreate, I think many times can definitely make it more enjoyable. All of this moving forward, it isn't free. I mean, many of the trails are already there, but even for outreach tools, boots on the ground, advertising, website, staffing, I assume this costs $1 or $2. And, how does Orogenesis do it? Us as a stewardship, we have multiple avenues, and, Chris McNamara, he's been a huge part of helping us learn how to reach out better, and talk to the right people and have the correct conversation and get into networks of folks that can support you, financially, so that we can continue our mission. But is that, how has that been for Orogenesis? I mean, there's always challenges there, but yeah, what are you guys doing, and how's it going?
It's been great. It's a challenge as always, because, nonprofit world, and maybe even specifically the trail nonprofit world, you really have to pull funding from multiple streams. There's not just like one door you have to knock on, and then you're covered. And I'm sure Sierra Buttes is trying to figure out the recipe too, like how much of revenue needs to come from donations or events or industry partnerships, etc. So luckily we've been 100% donor funded. We've had a couple of industry partnerships here and there, but for the most part, 100% donor funded, which has been great. It's definitely a bit of a luxury right now. A lot of our partner organizations are having to fire staff people because of the federal cuts, because their budgets come from the federal budgets that have been cut. So it's definitely a big challenge for a lot of our partners, but we've been lucky in that regard that it hasn't impacted us directly. It just is going to impact the work we're trying to do in these regions. Yeah, going forward, a lot of it is education. Just keeping track of all the trails on the route is super challenging. Of the trails, their status, what are the needs, where. We lose hundreds, probably 100, 200 miles of trail every year to wildfire that need to be rehabilitated. And then, big rain events have a similar impact on trails, really making that can be even more labor intensive than wildfire damage. So it's a very dynamic landscape, and there's a lot of stuff we need to keep track of. So that's a big challenge. That takes a lot of time. And doing trail work events, of course, is the first thing you think of. So that's also we want to make that a big focus into the future. And then working with the local communities to build the new trail connections that create better connectivity down the road.
For sure. And as always, for those of you out there that do have, local organizations that support your trails, especially on the nonprofit side, keep those donations going, because they need them. And, just by sheer default, you could be helping Orogenesis in that way as well. But for folks right now, Gabriel, where should they go? Is it Orogenesiscollective.org? Is there a pathway for folks to donate or become donors there on the website?
Yeah, if you go to Orogenesiscollective.org, there is a button in the upper right, I think. We're actually a project through Bikepacking Roots, which is a bikepacking organization that operates nationwide. So this is sort of born out of that organization. We're still umbrellaed under them, under their 501c3 while we wait for ours. So that donate link will take you to their website, but all those funds are earmarked for Orogenesis, so they come directly to us. So it's really simple. That's the best place to do it.
And rumor has it you guys have a map as well that folks can purchase. So what's the map, or does that exist yet, or is that something that's coming?
Yeah, it exists. It's this amazing illustrated map. Alex Hodgkin out of Australia drew it for us, and it's gorgeous. I'm really stoked. I'm looking at a stack of them right here. I just haven't actually figured out a way to build a web store or found the time to build a web store to actually sell them yet. So we did a little promo campaign in December at the end of the year. For donors with those, but I will have a web store up and running with those on them here in the near future.
All right, folks. So keep at it. Get to Orogenesis there on social media and get connected to the website for sure, and stay tuned.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add on the fundraising front is that's another playbook we're always developing is how do we not only raise money, but how do we help all the partner organizations raise money? And I think we've been lucky enough in Tahoe to have a lot of great mentors. And we're trying to then share that knowledge with a lot of organizations that often aren't familiar with like a major donor campaign or how do you get these kind of bigger donations. And so I think our dream is to develop that playbook so that pretty much anyone can use it. And then when we come to a project, hopefully it's not seen as like, oh, wow, one more thing. We're already stretched pretty thin over here. But instead, it's like, actually, how could we help you guys maybe unleash some potential for more funding with your existing community? And certainly that's how we hope Sierra Buttes feels through kind of the interaction with Orogenesis is, oh, this didn't become a burden. This actually became just one other way to help us get our dreams accomplished. So that would be our dream. Those two things is having trail organizations feel like they have one more helpful partner, and then also just develop that playbook, that knowledge base that, any trail organization, maybe even any nonprofit organization, as they get further along in their evolution and they reach that point where they were like, okay, we were scrappy, but now it's time to actually start getting some of those bigger checks. That would be helpful. And hopefully we can help with that.
Scrappy is definitely a term, Greg. I know you know that for sure. I'm scrappy for a long time, and of course had a lot of successes, and then a global pandemic hit, and boy, that was a slap in the face and a big wake up call. But to Chris's point, Greg, we've had some success, and maybe just touch on how things have changed for you and us as an organization when it came to fundraising, and how we need to continue exactly what Chris was talking about, that playbook.
It seems like it's just like this ever moving target of trying to find funding, and Chris has been a huge mentor and help for me as a person and us as an organization to, we were always really good at partying everybody down and putting on these events and, thanking everybody, but we never asked for help. We were always, we figured if they did one of our races or rode a shuttle or picked up a shovel, we were doing just fine. And then when the pandemic hit and we weren't able to do those things, we really realized like, okay, we gotta, all these people we've been partying down, we gotta ask for help. And, we experienced that during COVID, and then, in the middle of COVID with the Dixie fire, having to ask for help again. And, now we find ourselves in a position where, our federal partners, our Forest Service staff are being let go. And, it's going to be another gap that we have to fill. And, I think for us and for a lot of organizations is like just trying to stay positive and financially healthy so that when there is a plan, we're part of that solution, and I love like not having grants. I love the private funding, because we can be more maneuverable. when we have opportunities, we can take advantage of those opportunities. And a lot of that just comes from like building trust with your donors, that they're not putting restrictions on those funds, but really like, hey, be tactical and get the most work done that you can with these dollars. So, for all organizations, it's being diversified and not having all your eggs in one basket, and being able to work across different land management agencies or private, land trust properties. I think for us, more importantly, like we have this crew of people that depend on being employed. So we got to be diverse.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that would be the theme, I think, that would transpose, through many outdoor recreational organizations, trail organizations, and certainly, I think if we keep that family going, because it really is, a family of groups of people, organizations, and communities that make, large projects like this successful, and then of course maintaining, existing infrastructure on trails, and when the family comes together. Definitely can be more successful. And I know that we certainly want to see the success of Orogenesis, and looking forward to helping and doing our part as far as the stewardship goes. And we're kind of approaching the end here, so we'll get into some final thoughts. But Gabriel, right now, what is the most important thing for individuals and or organizations that may be listening? What's the most important thing for them to help you guys, to help Orogenesis come to fruition?
Donating money is great. Obviously, that's how we operate. That's how we make it all happen. But just signing up for our newsletter is helpful. That's how we get information out there about events and whatnot. And honestly, the easiest way you can get involved is just go ride your bike. Like that information. Like we're in this inventory process of trying to understand all the single track sections of the whole route. So like I mentioned earlier, it's around 1,500 miles. There's 165 of those miles have an unknown status right now to us. So we're working on a way to get that up on the website so scouts can go look at the list of where these unknown trails are, head out there with their friends, check it out, and report back on the status, what it needs. Maybe it's in great shape already. There's also a number of trails that are not passable or passable but needs work. That's also an opportunity for folks to head out and do a little work with their friends. So I think just more tires on a lot of these trails is going to be the most beneficial thing for them. So many of them are just being lost because of unuse. So if you ever feel like there's too many people, too much traffic at your local trail system, I've got a whole list of trails for you to go check out.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about where we are as an organization. I think there's a strong connection to where Greg was. What is it, 22-ish years ago, with getting the chainsaw stuck. I think that's kind of us. Literally, a lot of these trails are looking for that person who's going to come across them and just take ownership and get excited. And so to me, that type of experience isn't for everyone, but a lot of people, the more adventurous folks, this is kind of the moment to be at the beginning of something. And so we just want the word to be out there so that those people can be like, yeah, like maybe get my chainsaw stuck a little less often, but at the same time, be a part of that like beginning of creating something hopefully really enduring. So that's just the message we'd love to get out. There's so many different ways to get involved, and this really is the beginning still.
And definitely, if you're going to be out there using a chainsaw on some larger cuts, make sure you have a scrinch with you, because apparently is that what it's called, Greg? Is the scrinch?
Yeah, that's what we dug one of the saws out with. We had no other tools other than the one they gave us when we bought the saw.
Well, you guys, it's what a great project, and I'm super stoked about this, and I know that there's going to be some future podcasts on this, and as the successes continue. And really appreciate all three of you being on. I mean, just the connections alone with what you do individually outside of Orogenesis is huge, and to see this come together and to see the family of organizations to start working together, and I'm looking forward to that too, and seeing some other playbooks from up north, and and hoping that if there's a new organization that is starting out there that can, come in and check out what Orogenesis is doing, what the Sierra Buttes Trail Stewardship's doing, the more of those organizations and more of those family of communities come together and help produce these trails, keep the trails open, it's better for all of us. And we're definitely giving our government partners, a big hand up in keeping our public lands open. And I mean, that's the ultimate point, is to be out there and enjoy those. So if there's any final thoughts right now or anything else, Gabriel, we need as far as letting folks know how they can be involved. Obviously, again, orogenesiscollective.org is the website. And if you Google that, I'm sure you're going to find the social media as well. But if there's any final thoughts, we'll have them right now.
Yeah, it's been an honor to be here. And I just want to say, working with these other groups, other communities along the route, like they're looking to Sierra Buttes as an inspiration. The Connected Communities is a visionary project. So, there's a community down at Oakhurst Bass Lake right now that is trying to do the very same thing there. There's the whole east side of the Sierra that's working on a big trail system, connected trail system. So it's just, it's an honor to be here and talk to you guys, because I think you're one of the first and the original, and have really learned a lot about how you get this stuff done.
Yeah. And I'll just echo what Gabe said. It's one thing to build, amazing trails. It's another thing to just inspire thousands of people beyond your own area. And that's what you guys have done. So thank you.
Yeah. It's, you never saw it coming, honestly, like we talk about that. It's just, you find yourself in it and trying to keep your family and your friends around you. So that's really what it's about.
And I'll have to echo the same, the Downieville Classic, AKA the Coyote Classic, started 30 years ago, this year. And this year will be the 27th running of the Downieville Classic. And even prior to that, Greg with a van, bringing people up just to ride epic trails. And sometimes, sparks can fly in a positive way. And here we are today, with the stewardship. Here we're talking about the potential longest mountain bike trail in the world, and all those things, how, all the variables it took to get to this very point and keep it going is pretty spectacular. So in my mind, it was fate. It was meant to be. So I'm really looking forward to all the continued successes. And again, Gabriel, Greg, Chris, thank you so much for taking your time and being on the show. Happy to have you on Dirt Magic. And hey, that's Orogenesis as well, creating Dirt Magic as we speak. So, gentlemen, thanks so much for joining the show. And I look forward to our successes and to a follow-up show in the not too distant future. So everyone have a great weekend. And thanks again for being on the show.
Thanks, Marty.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
You've been listening to Dirt Magic, the podcast, brought to you by the good people of the Sierra Buttes Trail Stewardship. For future and past shows, visit dirtmagicpodcast.com or search for us on your favorite listening platform. Music by The Saddle Tramps. To learn more about supporting the SBTS and upcoming events, visit sierratrails.org. I'm Martin Scheel, and I'll see you out on the trails. Thanks again for listening.